Present.
Vice Chair Blair.
Present.
Ms. Popkin. Not present. Mr. Bering. Not present. Mr. Hall.
Present.
Mr. Reeves. Ms. Bagley.
Here.
And Mr. McGregor.
Present.
All right, we got quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Del Castillo. We have one item on our agenda today for discussion. Did we have any registered speakers this morning?
No registers.
Okay, no registered speakers, and we have one in attendance. Sir, are you here to speak on the agenda item? Okay, thank you for being with us. So with that, Ms. May, would you read the item into the record and update us on the case report?
Okay, DCA 212006 is consideration of amending the Dallas Development Code, sections 51A 2.102, definitions, 51A 4.408, maximum building height, and related sections to modify how building height is measured and how a grade is established. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen. And I'm going to mute while I talk to myself. Okay. So again, we're talking about how we're measuring building height, and we've had a few rounds of this so far, and I got a lot of great feedback from y'all, so thank you. It helped me refine how, the proposals being structured and what the issues are with the current way of measuring height and how grade is established, and it also just gave me an opportunity to reflect on all of our issues that we've had, in plan review and having to explain, our current definition of grade and learning about building code and how that's established. So it's been a great learning opportunity. And also thank you for volunteering for this board. The public may not know, but y'all are all volunteers, and you spend a lot of time and effort and work on this. So, I know me and the rest of the staff really appreciate y'all. So just wanted to thank you for all that. Before we get started, is my microphone working okay? Anybody online having any issues? Like Chung Ho?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I also wanted to mention that Chung Ho Yi, one of our really, senior engineers at our development services department, has joined us. And if we have questions about, what the staff engineers look at for grading plans, he can help with those questions. The purpose isn't really for zoning to be involved in the engineering and drainage and, the proper grading of a site, but really we want to reflect on how high a building can be constructed, right? Because that's part of our zoning ordinance and what we, want to fit in with surrounding properties and things like that. So I have made some changes. Let's see. Yes, so that's our consideration. The background, it did originate with building inspection, now called Development Services Department. Basically, it comes from a struggle that staff has where we just have to, we have a different definition and way of measuring than International Building Code, International Residential Code. And so we have to ask for new things to be shown when there's a complicated site. A lot of sites in Dallas, it's kind of a plain area of the country, kind of flat for the most part. So it doesn't happen everywhere, but it happens enough that it does create a lot of inefficiencies. So I did want to just kind of start with a few pictures just to kind of wrap our heads around the concept and what we're trying to accomplish. So this is just a picture of your typical 1920s pier and beam house. I think this one's in a conservation district that the conservation district team shared with me. And it's showing how their finished floor is elevated above the ground to beyond them. You might also notice, which you can probably see on like the bottom left-hand corner, the yard is elevated somewhat above the sidewalk. And that's pretty typical. You don't really want water from the street to run into your house and, things like that. These are all good things, This was some pictures that Chair Hampton shared, and I just wanted to show them so that we can just have those in our minds as we're discussing it. But you can notice from these pictures, and I think I have one more slide of this particular location, their finished floor, you can kind of tell where the stoop is landing, is up here, elevated above this grass. And as you notice, the grass also slopes out towards the street. And that's just another view, I think, of the same staircase. And this is another view. They constructed a half garage for parking underneath, and so it sort of looks like they may have added some soil in order to change that grade to me. But this is another example that I came up separately. Over and it's Google, so I will give them the credit for that. Same situation. They have some grade added here in this basement garage, but you might also notice that there's a retaining wall over here on that adjacent property, and these are kind of things that I think that we're trying to avoid and stop from happening, or at least, if they want to do that, we're measuring height from here, maybe like where this step is, wherever the, kind of natural grade is, to the, 36 feet up, wherever that happens to be. So I just kind of want to jump in on the changes. I'm just going to go ahead and skip straight to grade. And let me move the picture so that I can read it better. Okay. So, and this also kind of begins on page 7 of the report, in case y'all wanted to, if you had your own copy in front of you. So grade used to be measured from the finished ground surface elevations. I skipped down here to the strikeout. Measured at the highest and lowest exterior corners of a structure. So it doesn't include the ground around it necessarily. It just says it's where the ground is at the highest and lowest exterior corners of the structure. And that differs from the IBC code, and I have some professional architects over here that can help me when I'm like, I don't really know what this says. But and I'll try to explain what I understand, which I would appreciate if I got this wrong. But and I did copy it on page 12. So the IBC says grade plane is a reference plane representing the average of finished ground level adjoining the building at exterior walls. Where finished ground level slopes away from the exterior walls, the reference plane shall be established by the lowest points within an area between the building at the lot line, or where the lot line is more than 6 feet from the building, between the building and a point 6 feet from the building. So it's kind of not worded in my normal lexicon, so I had to, read it like 30 times to try to understand what it means. But what I understand it to mean, especially like in Dallas, where we're not building at the side of a mountain, like most of our slopes are going away from the building, that we would, in IBC, you would be looking for the lowest points within 6 feet of the building. And then and it's not even points in IBC, it's like a linear length of a building average. It was really complicated with IBC. So, because I found it so complicated and different than our current way of measuring grade, I came up with this other method of finding the average. What does it say? So the proposal is highest and lowest points of the finished ground surface elevations on a building site measured at the structure when the finished ground surface elevation is flat or slopes upwards, which isn't really going to be the case in most instances, or within 6 feet of a structure abutting lot lines or right-of-way lines, whichever is nearer, including retaining walls and excluding areas located in a floodplain as defined by Article 5, when the finished ground surface elevation slopes away from exterior walls. So, so this carries over that 6 feet kind of area, you know, as the IBC would. And the purpose is to capture whenever things are sloping upwards or sloping away, if the ground is sloping away from the building, to include that in the calculation of grade. And also put in retaining walls just in case the retaining wall is exactly 6 feet away, you know, and so that there's less confusion. I think the areas located in a floodplain will probably be pretty rare to have a floodplain within 6 feet of a building, but you know, maybe. So, and then I also added a part C to have when a site contains multiple structures, additions constructed in phases or uneven ground story finished floor levels, grade is determined for each structure, phase, or finished ground story level, or ground story finished floor level. And that's the purpose of part C, is to, you know, when we have a site with a lot of topography, you know, they are given the benefit of being able to step, you know, the finished ground floor level, so that, you know, we can measure height, you know, per that section, instead of what we do now is just cut it in half and an average, and you're kind of left with this. I wish I was going to put a picture in here, but ran out of time. You know, you have a sloping site, and then because we do it as an average, it's just this short on one end, really tall on the other, and it doesn't really capture the, you know, the on Full House, you know, you're looking at San Francisco and it's on a sloping street and all the little houses are like sloping up with the street. You can't do that in Dallas. It'll just be short on one end and tall on the other with our current definition, if that's one structure. So that's the point of C. Okay, I guess, and this is kind of in preparation, go to our next slide. I also have like an alternative, sorry, where is my cursor? There we go. You know, the more I think about things, the more I think about, ooh, maybe this would be a better way of saying it. So in this alternate option, it's not in your report, so I apologize. I came up with it after the fact. I'm getting rid of, oh yeah, I guess C wouldn't be C. It would just be part of the same paragraph. So it would mean grade means the average of the uppermost low and the lowest low points of the finished ground surface elevation on a building site, measured within 6 feet of the structure, abutting lot lines or right-of-way lines, whichever's nearer, including retaining walls and excluding areas of the floodplain. When a site contains multiple structures, that's all the same. So I don't know if y'all have a preference or if we just want to move on and maybe we'll come back to this. Maybe we should just move on since we only have an hour. Yeah. or, yeah, okay. All right, well, anyway, all that to say is there's probably some changes where we can talk about it differently. Okay, so
Ms. May, I'm going to maybe pause for just a moment. That's a lot of information. I
It
think a
is.
lot of new information. I appreciate you responding to all the comments that you've received. But if the commissioners have any questions, maybe get those addressed now, and then those may inform how we move on as we start thinking about height and the other definitions.
okay.
Commissioner Blair.
In the areas of the city that aren't flat, and
Right.
most of Dallas is a flat, but we do have some areas that have difference in topography.
Mhm.
How would your definition impact those differences of topography? I know in my district,
Mhm.
I have areas that you have a street
Mhm.
and then you have a 40-foot drop.
Mhm.
And if you develop that, then how does your definition impact that topography and that ability to develop that land so that you can be consistent on a hilly type of
Yeah.
area?
Right. So right now, there's not really much flexibility in giving deference to those sites. You know, it's an average of the highest and lowest corners of the structure is how you measure grade. And it's not supposed, it can't include, as you can see here that's finished ground surface elevations does not include fill material not necessary to make the site developable, berms, or landscape features. So you today and propose, because I know it struck out here, but it's included separately. I just basically took it out of within a definition. So today you just have to average it, and it's in the middle. So are you familiar with the FDR high school? Oh, okay. Well, I also have Lakewood Elementary. Anybody? Yeah. I don't know. Let's see if I can. Well, anyway, especially we have a lot of schools that are kind of near creeks or floodplains, because schools are generally campuses that are like one large sprawling building. Because our current definition says we average grade is the average highest and lowest corners, exterior corners of a structure, then we have to look at that entire campus, that entire building. So even though it slopes off into a creek in the back, that's gonna be our low point. And whatever the highest point is, that's gonna be our high point. And then we're gonna find the average. And that's when we start to measure height. So that's where we get into that, you know, one side's short, one side's extra tall, you know, to make up that average. And so it doesn't really give us a picture of a, you know, a uniform height of a building climbing a hill. You know, it just has the average. We're like, yeah, it's in the middle there.
So with that, can
Mhm.
may I? Since you use the school, Lincoln High School,
Uh-huh.
you know, Lincoln High School is actually sitting in a gully.
Yeah.
So you have houses up here
Uh-huh.
and actually taller than the school.
Uh-huh.
And the school is how would that impact how you measure height if you want to use school as an example?
Well, right now the school is based on the highest and lowest corners of the structure of the school. So if so it would just be, you know, you still would have to measure from inside the gully, you know, and you still would in the proposed. But yeah, so it's not a whole lot different, but it, you know, the part C here allows us to climb a hill with a building instead of just trying to fill up one side of a hill and, you know, excavate the other side of the hill to make this rectangle, if that makes sense.
So do we have other questions? And before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge that Commissioner Popkin has joined us and Commissioner Kingston is with us in the briefing room. So if there's not other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to height discussion. Thank you, Commissioner Blair.
Thank you. Okay. So let's get back here. Okay. So this all the previous slide and discussion about grade was just kind of a new, not even that new way of measuring grade. It's just more consistent with the IBC and IRC, so we don't have to do so much work re-educating them on, oh, I know that's the international way of measuring grade, but here in Dallas, we need you to go find these spot elevations at the corners of the buildings. And no, we're not looking anywhere except for at the structure. And it has to be, and we don't really take into account retaining walls. So that's part of the new proposed, to include all that and make it more consistent with those other international codes. Okay. So there was a lot of great comments, like I said before, about the measuring from finished floor and how that could be abused, if you will, when people are trying to build these, like we saw in the pictures earlier, people excavating just a little bit to get a little bit of space so they can add a whole extra story to their building. And the finished floor is elevated, feet into the air, however many feet that might be. So, it's longer, but it's designed to allow just a little bit of flexibility for the people that are building slab on grade foundations that aren't trying to do anything crazy. They're just trying to build a 3-story apartment, without basements or do anything wild. It's the part A is to capture the majority of people who are trying to do it, within the laws. So height means for a structure with a ground story finished floor, and I defined ground story, and we excluded basements in the rest of these things in the report. So for a structure with a ground story finished floor, the measurement of height begins at either the finished floor of the ground story when the finished floor is 18 inches or less above grade, which is that, average point, or grade when the finished floor of the ground story is greater than 18 inches above grade. So, it just kind of adds in a little bit of tolerance for that slab on grade foundation. And we can certainly talk about 18 inches. That came from a discussion with some conservation district staff. I basically just said, hey, what would you expect a normal pier and beam foundation, how high would you expect that finished floor to be from grade? And they said, well, it probably needs to be a minimum 12 to 18 inches just to get someone to crawl under the low side. And they said it could even be like 5 or 6 feet, just depending on how much the site slopes, on the extreme end. So anyway, so I was going for 18 inches. We could definitely discuss it if we want to, but the purpose is to give a little bit of tolerance, especially when we're fine tuning the highest and lowest points within 6 feet of the building or lot line, whichever's closer, to find what grade is. And then the measure, and then, we're going, I guess before I get to the ending point, did y'all want to talk about that? I guess it's a extenuation of the previous slides. So the point is that I did hear the concerns about people trying to take advantage of the finished floor concept and just elevating it, to whatever height they want to, like, the Galveston, pier and beam foundations that are, many, many feet in the air. So that's not going to be what we're going to do in Dallas. They get 18 inches. And if they can make it within 18 inches, we could just not have to send it in for a bunch of revisions and measure it from finished floor. Okay. All right.
Any questions before next item? Mr. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in examples such as the ones that you showed earlier in the photos where some current structures go up several feet before they hit the ground floor, right? So is there any concern that as we change this definition, buildings like those will be able to add height beyond what's allowed?
I'd say no. So since we're going to be measuring within 6 feet of the structure or to the lot line, and it includes retaining walls, just so that people don't get, crazy ideas, grade is not measured at the building anymore. It's measured 6 feet away from the building. So they can have, the average of that point 6 feet away, 18 inches above that, if they're going to put their finished floor there. But if they're not going to put their finished floor there, then we have to find grade still measured 6 feet away from the structure,
Are you
and
ta-
then measuring from that.
Are you talking about current existing structures though? So that building that we're looking at there as an example, their grade now is higher, right? Than with the new definition, it'll be higher. It'll be at the first floor level. Is that right? Go ahead.
Oh, no,
Is
sorry.
it not, I may be misunderstanding something. Is the new grade not going to be now for that building where its floor starts, where before it was the average between the highest and lowest point?
Yeah, so I changed that so that you only get to measure from the finished floor when your finished floor is no taller than 18 inches above grade.
Okay,
The new definition, the revised definition of grade.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
That helps.
so this one, we would not be measuring from finished floor. We would be finding out where grade is
Okay.
6 feet away from the building and then measuring from that. So
Okay,
this one, looks like it got measured from the building where the ground was on the building,
right.
and then, went up from there.
Okay, thank you.
And,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
same thing for this one. It looks like it was measured from the corner of the building here on the left. I don't know if you can see my cursor up there, but it's probably from here up 36 feet with a 4-foot parapet wall, theoretically. It may have even had some stairwells, maybe this is a stairwell for roof access. Who knows? But anyway, and we'll get to that later. Okay, so
Just a question.
yes.
Yes, Commissioner Popkin.
Maybe I haven't had enough coffee yet, but I feel like I am quickly trying to get up to speed on this. So I just wanted to kind of tie a neat little bow around all of this and see if I'm on board. Maybe there's other commissioners in my shoes who haven't finished their coffee yet either. Okay, so currently, and I'm familiar with very large sites that have, 20 foot of difference in topography over the very large site, and a large multifamily building going in on the site where, you can have vastly different grade, floor on one side than the other side. So, so let me know if I get this right. So previously, the way we measured grade was from the lowest corner of the building to the highest corner of the building. And now we're changing that to 6 feet away from the building. We're measuring the topo.
Right. So we're going to spread it out to include all the grades within 6 feet of the building. But probably for your sites that are changing 20 feet in grade, overall, they're probably going to split that ground floor and have a portion that is a little lower on their ground floor on one end, and then split it probably halfway, and then do another end that has, a different ground floor level. So for those sites with really large differences in their topography, they're probably going to utilize Part C when a site contains multiple structures, additions constructed in phases, or even ground or uneven, I'm sorry, uneven, ground story finished floor levels, grade is determined for each structure, phase, or ground story finished floor level. So right now, like you said, we're going to average that 20 foot and say, you know, your height starts 10 feet, you know, at the 10 feet in the middle, because, you know, 0 to 20 average would be 10. And then that's how we measure the height. So, you know, on the low side of that site, it looks like you have an extra 10 feet of height if you max it out. And on the other end, it looks like it's 10 feet shorter than the maximum height, just depending on where you are on that hill, if you will.
Mhm.
And so Part C is designed to allow them to have a more consistent, you know, height that goes with the hill. And yes, instead of measuring it from the corners of the structure, we're going to expand that out to the lowest points within 6 feet, which is consistent with the IBC definition of grade.
Okay, that makes sense. So if the developer decides to have a different phase or a different building or a different floor, then it would be, the building would then be required to be staggered. But if they
Right.
don't choose to make a separate floor, then they essentially kind of have 10 more feet of height on the high end where the ground slopes a little bit more. Is that potentially an outcome? If there's
Well, if
one
they,
ground floor and say a half buried parking garage, then that's still the average and they can build 36 feet above that average.
right, so we would still have to take the definition or calculation of grade as the average, right, of the either, maybe this would be easier, average of the uppermost low, so like the uphill low within 6 feet, and the lowest low, you know, the downhill. I couldn't figure a better way of saying that. I'm sure our attorneys can help me out. Or y'all can if y'all have good ideas for fixing that.
Highest point
But
and the lowest point.
right. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's the average. So if they just want one finished ground surface elevation or finished floor level for the entire structure, then we're going to look at where that finished floor is in comparison to this. IBC calls it a grade plane, which is probably a better term for that, but 2 words are harder than 1 in our code, changing it everywhere else. So it's that difference from the IBC grade plane to the finished floor. If that difference is more than 18 inches, then we're just going to make a step back down to the grade to measure height.
Oh,
Start
so
to measure
then
height.
grade is then measured by, or height is then measured by that grade rather than the floor. Is that what you just
Yes,
said?
Correct.
that's right.
Which is
Okay.
generally consistent with our current code. Is that correct, Ms. May?
That would be consistent with our current code,
But we're
except for the 6
we're
foot part.
adjusting how we're measuring that, trying to take into account where we may have topography changes, where, again, I think we've got many streets that have a slow, gentle rise where we're seeing fill coming in and seeing these adjustments happen over time.
Yes,
That's what this is trying to take into account. Is that correct?
exactly.
Thank you. Commissioner Popkin, does that
So-
answer your question?
Yes. So
You
to
have a follow-up.
clarify, yeah, just clarify. Okay, so what you just said was before we were measuring height from average grade, and now this addition of the Part C allows height to be measured by average grade or that floor, if that floor is more than 18 inches above average grade.
Right, right. So you would kind of have like zones while you're, you know, measuring grade, you know, so the original building kind of has their own grade zone that you're going 6 feet out from. And this new addition has their own little grade zone instead of having to measure the entire old and new addition, or this split level, you know, having to average everything out to have this inconsistent low on one side and giant on the other.
Okay, so in that previous example where the garage was dug into the ground and it kind of looked like maybe there was a berm so that the first floor started a little higher than maybe the average grade was to begin with, that if that garage height were more than 18 inches over the average grade, then that garage would be the first floor.
Right. There, yeah. And well, you wouldn't
Okay,
even measure
okay.
to the garage. You would just measure from grade at that point. If your
Uh-huh.
finished floor is more than 18 inches. Because if you look at this one, their ground story, which would probably be where those patios are is really tall, right? So that's definitely more than 18 inches. And you could see that truck right there. You know, so it's feet, you know, like probably at least 4 feet, maybe more. So for this one, instead of measuring grade at maybe the highest and the lowest exterior corners of the structure, as we currently,
Uh-huh. Mhm.
we're gonna measure grade 6 feet out, find the lowest points, the average of the lowest points. So here and here, down here, if you can see my pointer, and we're going to average those points, and grade is probably going to be down here in the dirt. Well, the new dirt. And then as long as your finished floor is less than 18 inches from this, then we can measure from the finished floor. But if it's more than 18 inches, then we're just going to measure from grade up.
Okay, thank you for that quick recap. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think I'm clear on where
No
we're
problem. It's
Commissioner
definitely new.
Popkin, this is very dense, and
Yes.
I appreciate Ms. May digging into this, but we're all getting up to speed. So thanks for the questions.
Thank
I'll
you.
keep drinking my coffee. Thank you.
Okay. Leah?
We've got about 20 minutes
Okay.
left, and I know we've still got a number of other revisions and additions
Yeah.
to go through here.
So I'll just kind of skip this slide. This just is kind of fixing some definition and to let you know we're not getting rid of this whole dirt skirt concept. It's still going to be in here. And defining ground story, because we do it in Article 13, but it's not defined in 51A. We just kind of have to make our best guess. And then skipping over to the maximum building height section. One change, which probably warrants some discussion, is our code currently only allows these extra things to exceed maximum structure height, not to exceed 12 feet in districts where the building height is limited to 36 feet or less. So this is going to be all of our R, D, TH, MF1 and 2, not MF3, not the mixed use districts, not the CR districts, not the CA1 districts. So only in districts where we want shorter buildings do they get these extra things that can go on top of a structure. And it's created a lot of PDs that, you know, probably not the only thing in a PD, but I've seen multiple PDs where like, oh yeah, and we also want to add these extra things on top of our maximum structure height that we've, you know, worked with the neighborhood to come to an agreement on. And I was looking at our appendix for our sister cities, and if you look at Richardson and Plano, and I think some other ones in here, they just include that exclusion, a lot of these exclusions in their definition of height. So in those cities, it's always exempt. And I guess maybe I'll finish what we are talking about. So elevator, penthouse, or bulkhead, mechanical equipment room. I'm just going to skip to the next one. Cooling tower. If you see all my notes here. Tank designed to hold liquids, ornamental cupola or domes, skylights, clear story was there. Visual screens which surround roof-mounted mechanical equipment, chimney and vent stacks, and amateur communications tower. All of those things were only allowed to exceed maximum structure height in the MF2 and lower districts in Dallas. And that just seems, just sort of like a gotcha, if you will. Because, if you're in, an MU district and you're building this nice mixed use building and, you've had all these, your building mass is kind of where that floor deck is. It's not these little things that protrude above it on top of the roof that most people can't see from the ground. But anyway, so again, trying to speed things up, and this next part is probably where we're going to have the most. I'm actually kind of excited about this next one. Mechanical equipment rooms have been allowed to exceed, the maximum structure height for a very long time, and I don't know when it started. It must have been at least 12 years ago, if not longer. Especially when we're thinking about our multifamily structures in the MF1 and 2 districts, access stairs to the roof have been allowed to project above the maximum structure height not to exceed 12 feet, because it was the rationale was, if they're allowed to have mechanical equipment rooms, don't they need stairs to get to it? And so then open the door for these access stairwells to be above the maximum structure height, but it had no regulations to regulate how big it could be, where it could be, how, and things like that. So it looks like we're, going crazy here, adding a whole bunch of things, but it really, the intent is to set some parameters to have those access stairs not at the front facade to make a really tall looking building, because if you put that stairway right up against that front facade, it could look like a 4-story building at that point. So the point of having the setback in double B, if you will, is to have it set back, step back. Stairs are typically, about a 45-degree angle. And, so having a setback of a 1-to-1 should allow, that headroom for the stairways to have a door to go above and access the roof, but it would create a more consistent 3-story appearance in those MF1 and 2 districts. I don't know of many single family structures that have roof stairs, but because they normally don't have mechanical rooms, but who knows? Shared access probably is probably one of those things, because those are single family. Anyway, okay. So I put a placeholder there for a cumulative area of projection, so that it's not, a giant, bedroom or something, by the end as a 4th floor, and also an additional setback, and clarifying that this A2 in particular cannot exceed residential proximity slope. So I'll get to that next, but first, for the placeholder, I don't know if y'all want to establish it here or leave that for CPC or whatever you want to do. But I was thinking 100 to 200 square feet. A habitable room is a minimum of 70 square feet. But if we're also thinking about the headroom for stairways, if we're going to do an area of projection, we need to consider, adding a little bit of floor area for that. So I just found some random multifamily plan that was in review, and they have this, all of the staircase and a mechanical room that does not exceed 70 square feet, and measured it. It came out to 171 square feet, and that, oops, I thought I had more balloons, but the stairway measured to be about 100 square feet. Yeah, and the mechanical room was about 70. So any thoughts on the size? Do we want to talk about, are we absolutely against access to stairs in the first place? Or do y'all want to talk about any of those things right now? Sorry.
Members, any questions? I would say, I think this seems like a reasonable addition. I think it addresses some of what you're seeing in building code. I think defining what that size is, I was going to ask you just from experience. I was trying to do a quick calculation as well. I think using the 70 feet for the a habitable room is a good reference point to ensure that it is serving its intended purpose as a mechanical space, a service space, and then, you know, including a stair of a reasonable side with a little bit of flexibility is probably, sounds like a good approach. Are there other comments or thoughts? So I think we have 2 more items, is that correct?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, and it can't be above residential proximity slope. And I just put a little balloon there just to not mislead anybody that these things are allowed to exceed residential proximity slope. This is just a copy and paste of, I think I got it from CR, I'm not sure. But it says exception except for chimneys. Structures listed in 51A 4.408A2, which is this section that we're talking about. They may not project through the slope to exceed 12 feet above the slope, blah, blah, blah. So this double C down here is just to say, you know what, no, this can't go above RPS. So, and okay, and then also I think staff has noticed that there's kind of been a lot of advantages taking of the term clear story. A lot of plans have been submitted and approved, and they're exceeding the maximum structure height with clear story windows as they put it on their plans. And like this one, for example, in red, we see all windows enclosed in red triangle, which aren't enclosed in red triangle, are clear story windows. So there's no floor below, sorry, no ceiling or floor between those top 2 rows of windows, but they're calling it a clear story, and it's exceeding the maximum structure height. And I don't think that's the intent of a clear story, but we don't have a definition of clear story, so it's kind of gotten out of hand in my opinion. So I kind of think we could do without the clear story, and if they want to go to the Board of Adjustment for a clear story, they can. Or, you know, maybe they can think of something else. They can still do skylights. But anyway, so, and so instead I was proposing maybe we could replace that with lightning rods, small satellite dishes, weather vanes, and similar equipment, you know, since that's not part of the list. I was even thinking maybe solar panels or something. Okay. And then just these last things, guardrails is proposed to kind of be a partner with parapet wall, because we've seen that a lot. Not to exceed the maximum structure height of the district, just to clarify, because it just said limited to 4 feet. And, you know, you can run with that. Is that 4 feet above the deck? Is that 4 feet above the maximum structure height? So we have maximum structure height here. And this note that's crossed out, it's a conflict with this other paragraph we were reading, you know, that says that these structures listed here are exempt from RPS. And this is saying A2 are subject to residential proximity slope. And just, it's this note has not been enforced like that. We've, you know, taken the district regulations that say you're exempt. So it's just eliminating a conflict. And then on this number 4 that's highlighted, instead of limiting these provisions to our lower density residential districts, it should just be a standard to not allow dormer eaves to project above maximum structure height. And since we're getting away from what a gable hip and a gambrel roof are and what they mean, I just changed it to be more consistent with the, oh, I guess I didn't even talk about that, but but anyway, so to have a pitched roof, and we can go back and talk about that, but basically it says you have a ridge, 2 slopes, and we're going to measure from the highest eave, as Stephen briefed us, you know, months ago now, probably. But it was just to be consistent with that. And just trying to align residential proximity slope. This whole vertical plane extending through is just kind of wordy in my opinion, and doesn't change the meaning. And since it was always measured from grade of the restricted building, I'm just aligning it with the proposal to be the beginning point of the measurement of height. You know, I'm sure that could be worded better, maybe, to be consistent with how we're redefining height. Let's see. Okay, that's in a nutshell, a lot in however long it is.
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, just a quick one. Who determines grade?
Who determines
Is
grade?
that the developer, the builder?
Well, building inspection staff have to, I mean, it's lovely when, you know, the designer or whoever's proposing the plans has thought about it and done it, but essentially it's staff that's going to take a look at it and say, this is the right way to measure. And it's always been like that.
At what point would the city go out and confirm grade or check grade? Is this strictly looking at blueprints, or do they go out to the site?
Well, a lot of, so our single family and duplex construction, they don't have grading plans unless they're proposing to raise the grade by 12 inches or more. And then they have to go through full engineering and grading plans approved by the city. But everything else, essentially, especially new construction and most additions, they'll have to have some grading plans approved by our engineering division. And Chang Ho's here, but yeah, so, you know, and they're looking at, you know, getting the water to the right locations. It's not going to flood properties, and, you know, make sure everything's safe. But the zoning plans examiner is going to know what the definition of grade is, double check that, you know, we'll say like, okay, your low is 595 and your high is 605. So your average grade is 600 feet, which is really tall for Dallas. That's not really. Anyway, but so put 600 feet on your elevation, you know, if it's a kind of crazy looking site. And then the designer has to put it on the elevation. And then, yeah, it gets verified out in the field, but
Yeah, thank you.
the finished floor is shown on the grading plans. So
Thank you, Ms. May. I'm
Yes.
trying to be mindful of time, and we
Yeah.
have one other discussion item and minutes to approve. Mr. Reeves, a very brief question.
Yes, very brief question. So you do say that currently the Development Services Department must request a signed and sealed grading plan from a licensed engineer that verifies the grade. Would staff be licensed?
no, the plan
So staff would not
seals
be
what
licensed,
the
right?
elevations
So
are.
my question is, which other municipalities, sister cities, whatever,
Mhm.
would follow this and not require a licensed engineer to verify the grade?
Oh, we're still going to need a licensed engineer to do it.
But we're trying to get rid of the licensed engineer verifying the grade to begin with, correct?
No, we're trying to give a little bit of flexibility when on slab and grade foundations.
But they would still have to have a licensed engineer verify the grade.
Yes. Well, a licensed engineer to design a grading and drainage plan.
Okay.
Yes.
But
I
you
mean,
just said that staff would determine grade when you answered Mr. Hall's question.
Yeah, so staff is determining grade as defined by the Dallas Development Code, not where dirt should be located. So zoning staff, we're not designing how drainage should be taken account for. We're trying to determine how tall the building is. And to determine how tall it is, we got to figure out where to start from. And to figure out where do we start from, we have to look at the grading plan and see if they're grading it to be relatively flat, or if it's in this crazy creek bed area that we have to, you know, find the highest and lowest points within that 6-foot area. And I'm telling you, it's complicated. I'll show you all some grading plans sometime, but
So there's a lot here, and I
Yes.
think, and we appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I think I would recommend that we would consider holding this under advisement to allow for the members to dig into this in a little bit more detail. I would recommend that we all send any questions, particularly items regarding how the city is calculating grade with these new definitions. I would say generally, I'm glad to see some of these definitions and look forward to reviewing them in more detail. Is there a motion to hold this matter under advisement?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Second by Mr.
Second.
Reeves. Oh, thank you, Mr. Hall. I saw Mr. Reeves first. Any further discussion? So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, and I think Ms. May is looking for a date from us. I'm not sure that we can, our next item is actually discussion of our schedule. So if you could pause for a moment, perhaps we could come back and clarify that. Our next item is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve our July 7th minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Commissioner Blair, for your second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. So the ZOAC meeting dates. This was a discussion from our last meeting that, and as we're seeing this morning, we're having some time challenges with other meetings of the commission and other committees. A recommendation is to consider moving our meetings, the ZOAC meetings for the month of August to Tuesday of the week of CPC. So those dates would be August the 2nd, August the 16th, and August the 30th. If that is acceptable to the committee, may we have a motion?
Can you please repeat those? I'm looking at
August.
my calendar multitasking. I can't handle that.
The dates that we are considering are Tuesday, August the 2nd, Tuesday, August the 16th, and Tuesday, August the 30th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Blair, for your second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all. So those will be our meeting dates for August. And Commissioner Blair has asked a question about time. I believe the time will be established by staff as they set the agenda. They are anticipated to be morning meetings, similar to our current schedule, hopefully at 9 a.m. instead of 8. We will wait to hear from staff on that. So we've discussed meetings. So our next agenda will be short-term rentals, our discussion meeting, as we discussed at the July 7th meeting, which would potentially, I will defer to staff on how they would like to organize that. I would suggest we would consider having building height come back either on the 30th or perhaps our first meeting in September. And I'll defer to staff, and we'll see that in our posted agendas if that's acceptable to all the members. All right, having no further items on our agenda, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Is there a second, Mr. Hall? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right, our meeting is adjourned at 9:59 a.m. Thank you to staff, Ms. May, Mr. Del Castillo, and everyone for being here, and members. Thank you.